Why doesn't Python have a sign function? I can't understand why Python doesn't have a sign function. It has an abs built in, which I consider sign's sister, but no sign. In Python 2.6 there is even a copy sign function, in math, but no sign. Why bother to write a copy sign x, y, when you could just write a sign and then get the copy sign directly from abs x sign y? The latter would be much more clear, x with the sign of y, whereas with copy sign you have to remember if it's x with the sign of y or y with the sign of x. Obviously sign x does not provide anything more than CMP x, 0, but it would be much more readable than this too, and for a greatly readable language like Python, this would have been a big plus. If I were a Python designer, I would be in the other way around, no CMP built in, but a sign. When you need CMP x, y, you could just do a sign x, y, or, even better for non-numerical stuff, just do x, y. Of course this should have required sorted accepting a boolean instead of an integer comparator. This would also be more clear, positive when x, y, whereas with CMP you have to remember the convention positive when the first is bigger, but it could be the other way around. Of course CMP makes sense in its own for other reasons. For example when sorting non-numerical things, or if you want the sort to be stable, which is not possible using with simply a boolean. So, the question is, why did the Python designers decide to leave the sign function out of the language? Why the heck bother with copy sign and not its parent sign? Am I missing something? Edit, after Peter Hansen comment. Fair enough that you didn't use it, but you didn't say what you use Python for. In 7 years that I use Python, I needed it countless times, and the last is the straw that broke the camel's back. Yes, you can pass CMP around, but 90% of the times that I needed to pass it was in an idiom like lambda x, y column CMP score x, score y, that would have worked with sign just fine. Finally, I hope you agree that sign would be more useful than copy sign, so even if I bought your view, why bother about defining that in math, instead of sign? How can copy sign be so much useful than sign?
Edit. Indeed there was a patch which included sign in math, but it wasn't accepted, because they didn't agree on what it should return in all the edge cases, +/0, +/nan, etc. So they decided to implement only copy sign, which, although more verbose, can be used to delegate to the end user the desired behavior for edge cases, which sometimes might require the call to CMP x, 0. I don't know why it's not a built-in, but I have some thoughts. Most importantly, copy sign is a superset of sign. Calling copy sign with x equals 1 is the same as a sign function. So you could just use copy sign and forget about it. If you get sick of passing two whole arguments, you can implement sign this way, and it will still be compatible with the IEEE stuff mentioned by others. Secondly, usually when you want the sign of something, you just end up multiplying it with another value. And of course that's basically what copy sign does. So, instead of you can just do. And yes, I'm surprised you've been using Python for 7 years and think CMP could be so easily removed and replaced by sign. Have you never implemented a class with a _CMP_ method? Have you never called CMP and specified a custom comparator function? In summary, I found myself wanting a sign function too, but copy sign with the first argument being 1 will work just fine. I disagree that sign would be more useful than copy sign, as I've shown that it's merely a subset of the same functionality.
Copy sign is defined by IEEE 754, and part of the C99 specification. That's why it's in Python. The function cannot be implemented in full by abs x sin y because of how it's supposed to handle NaN values. That makes copySign a more useful function than sign. As to specific reasons why IEEE signed it X is not available in standard Python, I don't know. I can make assumptions, but it would be guessing. The math module itself uses copySign 1, X, as a way to check if X is negative or non-negative. For most cases dealing with mathematical functions that seems more useful than having a sign X which returns 1, 0, or -1 because there's one less case to consider. For example, the following is from Python's math module. There you can clearly see that copySign is a more effective function than a 3-valued sign function. You wrote, "If I were a Python designer, I would been the other way around, no CMP built in, but a sign." That means you don't know that CMP is used for things besides numbers. CMP this, that, cannot be implemented with a sign function. Edit to collate my additional answers elsewhere. You base your justifications on how abs and sign are often seen together. As the C standard library does not contain a sign X function of any sort, I don't know how you justify your views. There's an abs int and fabs double and fabs float and fabs along but no mention of sign. There is copySign and signbit but those only apply to IEEE 754 numbers. With complex numbers, what would sign 3 plus 4j return in Python? Were it to be implemented? Abs 3 plus 4j return 5.0. That's a clear example of how abs can be used in places where sign makes no sense. Suppose sign X were added to Python, as a complement to abs X. If X is an instance of a user-defined class which implements the _abs_ self method, then abs X will call x._abs_. In order to work correctly, to handle abs X in the same way, then Python will have to gain a _sign_x slot. This is excessive for a relatively unneeded function. Besides, why should sign X exist and non-negative X and non-positive X not exist? My snippet from Python's math module implementation shows how copySign X, Y, can be used to implement non-negative, which a simple sign X cannot do. Python should have better support for IEEE 754/C99 math functions. That would add a signbit X function, which would do what you want in the case of floats. It would not work for integers or complex numbers, much less strings, and it wouldn't have the name you are looking for. You ask why, and the answer is sign X isn't useful. You assert that it is useful. Yet your comments show that you do not know enough to be able to make that assertion, which means you would have to show convincing evidence of its need. Saying that NumPy implements it is not convincing enough. You would need to show cases of how existing code would be improved with a sign function, and that it outside the scope of Stack Overflow. Take it instead to one of the Python lists.
Another one-liner for sign. If you want it to return 0 for x equals 0.
Since CMP has been removed, you can get the same functionality with It works for float, int and even fraction. In the case of float, notice sign float nan is 0. Python doesn't require that comparisons return a boolean, and so coercing the comparisons to bool protects against allowable, but uncommon implementation.